not on the floor. Okay, here we go. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Stapad Paramahamsa Parudikacharya Ashtotar the Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parudikacharya Ashtotar the Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So, the lady said she might come back, so just be ready to move if she does. The one who was here this morning. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the second day of August, 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness, text number 26 on page 558. Okay. 26? No, we read 24 and 25. We barely finished 25. I know that because I checked. Trust me. Okay. Anye tvevam ajananta shudvanebhya upasate te api chatatadanti eva mityum shutiparayanaha anye tvevam ajananta shutvanebhya upasate te pichatatantyeva mityum shutiparayanaha anye tvevam ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate te pichata tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya Upasate Te Pichata Tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Chepitata tarantyeva Mrityung Shruti Parayanaha Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Tepichata tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha. Yeah, hold on. Ishtadeva. You're next. Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Yeva Tepi Chata Tatantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha. Go ahead, Ravi. Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Te Pichata Tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Te Pichata Tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha. Tyler. Anye Tvevam Ajananta Shutvanebhya upasate Te Pichata Tarantyeva Mrityum Shruti Parayanaha. So I'll read through the synonyms. Anye, others too, but evam, thus, ajanantaha, without spiritual knowledge, Shrutva, by hearing, anyebhyaha, from others, upasate, begin to worship, te, they, api, also, cha, and, atitaranti, transcend, eva, certainly, mrityum, the path of death, Shrutipadayanaha, inclined to the process of hearing. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about Him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. Purport. This verse is particularly applicable to modern society, because in modern society there is practically no education in spiritual matters. Some of the people may appear to be atheistic or agnostic or philosophical, but actually there is no knowledge of philosophy. As for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. This hearing process is very important. Lord Caitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing, because if the common man simply hears from authoritative sources, he can progress, especially, according to Lord Caitanya, if he hears the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is stated, therefore, that all men should take advantage of hearing from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. The worship of the Supreme Lord will then undoubtedly take place. Lord Caitanya has said that in this age, no one needs to change his position, but one should give up the endeavor to understand the absolute truth by speculative reasoning. One should learn to become the servant of those who are in knowledge of the Supreme Lord. If one is fortunate enough to take shelter of a pure devotee, hear from him about self-realization, and follow in his footsteps, one will be gradually elevated to the position of a pure devotee. In this verse particularly, the process of hearing is strongly recommended, and this is very appropriate. Although the common man is often not as capable as so-called philosophers, faithful hearing from an authoritative person will help one transcend this material existence and go back to Godhead, back to home. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, Krishna is describing who can understand this philosophy that he's been speaking. In the previous verse, he talked about perceiving the super soul. Just one more time to review, since it's Monday. The chapter began with Arjuna asking a sixfold question. What is Prakriti? What is Purusha? What is the material energy? And what is the living entity who is trying to enjoy that material energy, known as the Purusha? What is the Kshetra, meaning this body? It's kind of a field in which we interact with the senses. And who is the knower of the field? Now, as I mentioned last time, that knower of the field is the same Purusha, but he's speaking about it from a little different aspect. So you have the Prakriti, Purusha, the Kshetra or field, and the Kshetra Gya. The word Gya means knower. Then, what's the purpose of all of this knowledge, of understanding these things? So first he gives a whole 20-fold analysis of steps of transcendental knowledge, which is beginning with amanatvam, humility, amanatvam. And then adambitvam. Adambitvam is next. Now, those who are familiar with the 16th chapter know that this quality of dambha is the first one mentioned for the demons. So we definitely have to give it up. So that's why it says adambitvam. No adambha. Damba is false pride, or more specifically, hypocrisy. And hypocrisy in the matter of pretending to be religious when actually one is an atheist or against religion. I learned a word recently. You know this word, tartuffe? Tartuffe. You know that. It's a play, but it's also the hero, the protagonist in the play, I think, or one of the main. But a tartuffe, I looked it up in the dictionary. I didn't know what it meant. I saw it was a person. Someone who is pretending to be religious, but actually is not, you know. So one has to give that up. One has to be sincere, and one has to be humble. And then go on with these 20 aspects of knowledge, the most important of which is to be an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Someone who is, okay. All right, you can point your feet there. Yeah, it's okay. Just don't point your feet at Prabhupada. Don't point it at me. And if you need a chair, we have other chairs. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so what is the purpose of all this knowledge? That's the idea. What's the goal of knowledge? That was the other question. What is knowledge and what is the goal of knowledge? So we have sixfold. We have nature, the enjoyer in nature, the field of activity, the body, the soul who knows its body, the elements of knowledge, and what the goal of that knowledge is. So it turns out that the goal of the knowledge is understanding, first of all, the twofold soul that's mentioned. The Kshetra Gya is twofold. There's the living entity and also the super soul in the present, who's present in everybody. And understanding that super soul, Krishna has been speaking about in the last few verses. He has that seminal verse in text 22, which describes the Purusha and the Prakriti. Purusha Prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jangunan karanam gunasangasya sadasadyoni janmasu. This is the verse that describes how we got here in this material world and how we stay here.
And it also gives us a hint of how we can get out and how we return to our original eternal nature in the spiritual world. So the Purusha, the enjoying living entity, is situated within material energy. First within our body, which is made of material energy, and then throughout this whole world of earth, water, fire, air, ether, all these different material energies. And Bhunkte Prakati Janganan, we are experiencing, enjoying, suffering, the varieties of the modes of nature. The different Bhunkte Prakati Jan Gunan. Gunan is these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. The symptoms or the characteristics of those will be explained in the next chapter. Roughly speaking, the mode of goodness is more thoughtful and peaceful and philosophical. The mode of passion is working very hard to enjoy. And the mode of ignorance is, tomorrow, I'll clean it tomorrow, and let me go back to sleep. You know, it's conducive to too much sleep, intoxication, procrastination, ignorance like that. It's called the mode of ignorance. So those affect us. And they're not all just in one. Sometimes someone can be in the mode of goodness and sink down to the mode of passion, and occasionally even to the mode of ignorance, and then go back up to the mode of goodness. So they're always like vying for supremacy in our mind. So these three modes are what the material world works on, and it's the essence of the material energy, So we are situated within this nature, which is made of the modes. How we interact with the modes will determine our destiny. Karanam gunasangosya sadasadyoni janmasu. What that means is karana means the cause. Gunasanga. This word sangha is key to understanding the whole philosophy in the process. Association. The most important association for elevation has been explained in this purport. Hearing transcendental sound, real knowledge from realized authorities. That can transform our whole life. So, but generally we don't get that advantage, and we're simply associating with these modes. We say, okay, last night we went to the Hare Krishna temple. That was cool. Let's just go a few feet down and we'll go to the bar tonight. You know, it may happen like that. Hopefully it goes the other way. We went to the bar. Let's check out the Hare Krishnas, and they get some benefit. But in any case, you have some free will there. No one is forcing you to go this way or that way. But the decision you make, what you're going to associate with, the atmosphere there, the music, the people, the alcohol, this is obviously going to affect your consciousness. And if you stay in that mood, you develop an attachment, that'll be your reality. And it'll just be the place next to the Hare Krishnas. They won't learn anything here, but they'll be affected there. But if someone comes here, after a while say, I wouldn't go to that place in a million years. You know, I don't know, that's degrading, that's going to take me away from Krishna and so forth. So the difference is the choice you make and the influences that you undergo. So that's a key verse. Now in this, as he proceeds here, after that verse, he describes immediately what the super soul is. Upadrashta anumanta. Upadrashta literally means the overseer. Krishna is within our heart as the super soul. He's providing intelligence, knowledge, forgetfulness. He describes that in the 15th chapter. And he's sanctioning what we're doing according to all of our karma. Okay, this person is due for some good luck. Good things are going to happen. So you inspire him to go this way, that way, and then they prosper. Another person is driving on I-5. Okay, now it's time, for that bad karma to come. And the super soul is there. You go here, you go there, the range it, and some accident happens or something. This is what's going on. And the super soul is in everyone's heart and in every atom, all-pervading, omnipresent. This is one of the three qualities the Western philosophers and theologians have figured out. Omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. It's perfectly described the super soul in Krishna. Omnipresent, present everywhere. Omnipotent, different potencies. And the difference in our philosophy, coming down to us from Bhagavatam and its explainers, is the details of what are those powers. How is the Lord present everywhere? And what does he do in this presence? And this verse describes, text 23. Upadrashta and anumanta, overseer and permitter, sanctioning our activities. The master, the enjoyer, the Maha Ishvara, the supreme controller, Paramatma, known as the Paramatma, Dehismin Purushakpara. So understanding and knowing and getting a deep knowledge of that super soul, who is none other than Krishna, is the goal of all this development of knowledge in this chapter. So he's describing now the benefits of understanding this philosophy concerning material nature, living entities, the soul and the super soul, the interaction of modes of nature. If one understands it in truth, then you're liberated. You go back to Godhead. And then in the last verse, text 25, the one before that we finished with on Wednesday, who actually perceives this super soul? Some perceive through meditation. Well, we heard about that in chapter 6. Not very practical for us. You know, sincere meditation, going alone off to the Himalayas. Others through cultivation of knowledge. Well, we're doing some of that. And still others through working without fruitive results. This is karma yoga, jnana yoga. He's describing here. And now, 26, Prabhupada says, is particularly applicable to the modern society. This is where we have a chance. And that's what we're doing now. Others, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Lord upon hearing about Him from others. Because of the tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So this is the special prerogative of those in this age. Or let us say it is the main way in which we can really advance. Because these other processes are too difficult, especially the Ashtanga yoga. These, eightfold yoga, which entails eventually, Krishna describes in the 6th chapter, complete brahmacharya, celibacy, being alone, and you're visualizing, it's impossible. Go to a cave somewhere, and you're going to think, where's the Wi-Fi? It's impossible. You're so conditioned to that. So, but we can hear. Prabhupada, he works so hard to set up these temples. Why? They're places basically where you can learn about Krishna. You can hear the chanting, you can get prasadam, you can get books, classes, very important classes. He wanted us to study these books. So because of their tendency to hear from others, they also transcend the path of birth and death. Now, Prabhupada, in this purport, he refers to a verse that some of you may know. How far? Has anyone read through the 8th chapter of Madhya Lila? No, not yet. Okay, but you've heard about the conversation of Lord Caitanya and Ramananda Roy. So it's a key section of that Chaitanya Charitamrita. Some of the most esoteric aspects of Krishna consciousness are revealed there. And the whole interaction takes place where Lord Chaitanya takes the role of the student, of the disciple, and Ramananda Roy is the guru. He's answering the questions. He's reluctant to do it. He says, Lord Chaitanya is a sannyasi. He recognizes him as divine. And says, and Ramananda Roy's position was he was a manager. He was more or less in a Shudra position, actually. But he had been recommended by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Lord Chaitanya went on a South Indian tour. He said, you should find Ramananda Roy. Because although externally he's just a manager, but he knows the highest, most esoteric details of Vedic knowledge. So the interaction takes place, and Lord Chaitanya encourages him in this famous verse, who can become a guru? So says, because the Brahmins say, well, if you're not born in a Brahmin family, forget it. You'll have to, do the best you can, get born in a Brahmin family. And then Lord Chaitanya says, no. Kiba vipra kima nyasi shuddha kene noi, ye Krishna tattva veta se guru hoy. One can be a Brahmin, vipra. One can be a sannyasi or a Shudra kene noi. One who knows the truth, ye Krishna veta tattva, of Krishna tattva. In other words, all the details of how Krishna's energies are working and everything. He can be a spiritual master. So anyway, Ramananda Roy begins answering Lord Chaitanya's questions. And he begins asking him, what are the way, the standard thing that I meant, what is the sadhya and the sadhana? Remember I gave something like this last Sunday or a couple of Sundays ago, I asked. Sadhya and sadhana. Sadhya is understood to be first and foremost, breaking the bonds of birth and death. We're eternal. We've been going from body to body to body for who knows how long, millions of years. And it's just a lot of suffering, with a few little blips of pleasure to make us try to forget that it's mostly suffering. But then we get sick, we get old, we die, or we die. You have two choices. You can die prematurely, or you can die from old age and disease and death. Yeah, hanging or electrocution, you decide. So that's our fate. And we're all on death row, you know. But the good news is that we never die, is that it's just the body that dies. That's the first huge ray of hope, really, right at the beginning of the Gita. Jayate mrete bakadacha nayam bhutva bhavitanana bhuya arjo nityak shashvato yam purana nahandite yamani shirere. Basically, this verse says the same thing in all four lines. For the soul, there is never birth or death at any time. He hasn't come into being at some time. There are not new souls coming into being now, and in the future there won't be new ones. We're as eternal as Krishna. We're practically in infinite number, but we're eternal. We're Aja, unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. We are not slain when the body is slain. Well, that's good news. But what about getting out of this round? You know, birth and death, birth and death. How do we escape from it? Bhagavad Gita is teaching us. So, we have to understand the soul, the super soul, this material world. Where does Krishna, the cause of all causes, the supreme soul, where does he fit in, and what's the relation between all of these elements? That's what he's saying. Who can understand? So now, in this purport, Prabhupada refers to a key verse in that conversation. And because he keeps going up, he says, well, if, he quotes verses describing it all. Varnashramachatara purusha purushena parakpaman. One who follows the varnashram very closely and performs his duty and worships Vishnu in that way, that's the best thing. And Lord just said, that's external, go on. And he goes on in different verses in the Bhagavad Gita. He even goes to Sarva Dharma Parijajya, which is the last instruction of Krishna. Give up all other dharmas and just surrender unto me. I'll protect you from all sinful actions. Do not fear. And previous verses, you'll come to me. Just think of me, become devoted, worship me, bow down. But Krishna says, no, that's external. It's kind of a surprise when I first read that. Sarva Dharma is external. And then he goes, a few more of those. And then finally he gets to the verse that he refers to in this purport, which is a prayer of Lord Brahma in chapter 14 of the 10th canto. This is the famous prayers after the Brahma Vimohan Leela. Those of you, have you read Krishna Leela at all? Yet? Not too much. So there's one pastime where Lord Brahma himself, you've been hearing the morning classes, that same Brahma who came down and convinced Priyavrata to take up the management of the universe. So, very exalted soul. So he's witnessing Krishna's childhood Leela. Krishna's out there herding, not the cows, but the calves. He's so young, he doesn't get the calves yet. And the cows, just the calves. And he's enjoying with his friends, and they're taking lunch, and all his friends are looking at him and enjoying the exchange. So what happens is the calves wander away. They also want to take lunch, so they wander deeper in the forest. And suddenly, oh my God, our calves are gone, and we're responsible for them. So the boys want to get up and says, no, you just sit, I'll just go get the calves and bring them back. You keep taking them. So he goes, can't find the calves. Comes back, the boys are gone. So Brahma has taken them all, and he didn't hurt them at all, but he put them under his mystic powers of slumber, and they were asleep in a cave somewhere. So now Krishna's all alone. So what's he going to do? He can't return at home, and all the mothers will be distraught that their sons are gone. And what about the cows? They'll be distraught that their calves are gone. So what does he do, Amolga? Yes, he expands, he expands into identical boys and calves with all their idiosyncrasies that even their mothers can't tell that they're not the real, the dress, And then it goes on playing, and so they go, and for a whole year it does that. And they go home. Now what the interesting is that they don't mention the killing of this big 8-mile-long python demon that Krishna killed by, entering in. The Aghasura. He just dries up for a whole year. So that was startling to Parikshit. He said, well, why didn't he mention it? So then he tells this whole backstory, how Krishna has expanded himself. So when Brahma comes back from his time, now it's interesting, we learn about the relativity of time, that time passes differently on Brahma Loka. He lives for an inconceivable amount of time. You know the exact number. Exactly. Who can imagine? 311 trillion, 40 billion years. And one of the reasons why he can live so long is because his body is so subtle. It's made of intelligence. Our bodies are this contraption with plenty of earth and matter and liquids and everything. But not Brahma's body. It's pure intelligence. So it takes a long time to eventually degrade. But so you can imagine that's 100. It feels like 100 years to him. The standard is it feels like 100 years, but it's actually 311 trillion 40 billion of our years. So the point is that his time goes much slower or faster. I don't know. Anyway, after just a moment of his time, he comes back to see how everything's doing, and he finds Krishna playing with the boys and calves. What's going on? So he's bewildered. That's why it's called Brahma Vimohan Leela. Vimohan means completely bewildered. And finally he gets down from his swan and he offers obeisances, and Krishna, suddenly all of the calves and boys turn into Vishnu forms and they're being worshipped. And so then he bows repeatedly and he starts offering these prayers, incredible prayers. And right near the beginning, the third or fourth prayer is the one that he's referring to. And this is the one the first one that Ramananda Roy said, that Lord Chaitanya says, very good, now go on. And then they go on and on into the highest levels of Radha Krishna worship. So this is the verse, very key verse, probably would quote it a lot. Jnane priyasan vadapasya namante heva jivanti san mukaditam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shutigatam tanuvan manobi ye prayaso ajitadito pisitaistri lokyam. You know that one, Ravi? You've heard of it before. Okay. So jnane priyasam. Exactly what Prabhupada says. He says, Lord Chaitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing, because if the common man simply hears from the authoritative sources, he can progress, especially according to Lord Chaitanya, if he hears Hare Krishna mantra. So, the idea, what this verse says is, give up this very strenuous effort to speculate. Jnana is knowledge. Priyasam is tremendous effort. Can you imagine trying to figure all this out on your own? What is the truth? What is the source of everything? This is Western philosophy. So many philosophies. Give it up. You'll never get to the answer, because Krishna doesn't agree to be understood by that process. Jnane priyasam udapasya, kick it away, throw it far away. Namanta, surrender, bow down. Jivanti san, live in this way. Sun mukaditam. Sun is the sat. They are the sadhus, the saints. Mukaditam, from their mouth, their lotus mouth. We say, about Prabhupada. We pray, may my only desire be to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. So, what's coming, Bhavadiya Vartam. The word Vartam means news, or accounts of Krishna's pastimes and his knowledge and everything like that. It's coming from the great souls. They're speaking. And we need to listen. Bhavadiya Vartam. Stane stita. Don't do anything radical. You don't have to take sannyas. Stay where you are in your own position. But add this essential process of hearing. Shrutigatam, the path of hearing. Tanuvan manobir. Now this means tanu is your body, man is the mind, and vachobir is the words. So you have to worship these sound vibrations with your body, mind, and words. How to do that? I'll explain in a minute. The last line says, if you follow this process, then Krishna, who is Ajita, who is unconquerable, these big demons certainly couldn't conquer him, you will be able to conquer him. You'll be conquering. Well, how is that possible? Because by this process it culminates in the real sadhya, pure love. Mother Yashoda conquered Krishna, right? By her love, he agreed to be bound. The gopis also, ultimately, they conquered him, by their love. That's the only way to conquer him. And he agrees to be conquered. That's his pleasure, to be conquered only by those who love him. Those who hate him, they all get killed. They get conquered. So this is the process which is so practical for us. This comes up again and again in the Bhagavatam. In the third canto, the teachings of Kapila Deva, beginning to chapter 25. Right near the beginning, his mother approaches him. He's his exalted son, who's the incarnation of God. And she is taking the role of someone who's suffering in material life. Please enlighten me and save me, to her own son. So he begins with what I happen to be 8 verses about hearing from great souls, from the sadhus. Pasangam madaram pashamatmana kavayo vidu saheva sarashukato mokshadvaram apavatam. So he says, mundane affection. Notice the word sangha. I mentioned how important the word sangha is. So this is prasanga. Prasanga means intense association and attachment. Because what you associate with a lot, you become attached to. So prasangam majadam pasham. They are a very powerful association over many, many lifetimes has created many knots in the heart, like ropes. Ajadam pasham. Pasha means a rope, and ajada means very powerful. These ropes or attachments or knots, sometimes called knots, are keeping us bound here. So it's depending on what we associate with. So this mundane affection or attraction keeps us bound to birth and death, infernal. But love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. I put into a little couplet so you can remember easily. So who are those sadhus? That's the question. So then he has 3 verses describing the qualities of a sadhu. You can point here, away from it. In the Vedic culture, that's said to be disrespectful. So then he describes a sadhu. Here's a very important verse. You have to know this one by now. Titikshava, Karunika. At least you heard of it. Okay. There's a whole list gradually. You can learn it. Very simple. Titikshava, Karunika, Suridak Sarvadehinam, Ajata Shuttavak Shanta, Sadhavak Sadhubhushana. It's 25. It starts with 20, 21. Start 3, 25, 21. I think, yeah, look it up. I think you'll find it there. So what is titikshava? Who knows what that word means? Tolerance. Tolerance especially for physical things. There's different kinds of tolerance. Just like shanti, K-S-A-N-T, is a type of tolerance of insult, which can be much harder to tolerate sometimes than physical things. So titikshava, karunika, full of compassion and mercy for the fallen souls. Now you notice that this is exactly the qualities that a preacher has to have. You know, Jesus Christ perfectly embodied it. He was tolerant of so much attack against him, and yet he was full of mercy. He was trying, please forgive them, and he was preaching to everybody for their own good. Suridak Sarvadehinam, because of these qualities and his Krishna consciousness, he is the friend of every embodied being, not just human beings. That's why cow protection is so important, In other words, every living being. He sees their soul is there. There's part and parcel of Krishna. Everyone has divinity within. Ajata Shatrava, and therefore he has no enmity toward any living being. Ajata Shatra. Now, others may have enmity toward him. So they may see him as an enemy, but he sees no one as an enemy. He or she sees no one as an enemy. Ajata Shatra and Shanta. Because of this, he can be really peaceful. We discussed this morning. When you have your heart is full of material desires, you're never peaceful. Even if you have $10 billion, $100 billion, and we have people now who have $100 billion. But are they full of peace? Oh no. He went up in space before I did. How can I be peaceful? Dang, there's never enough, So, but to be free, Krishna gives the same formula in Bhagavad Gita. Near the end of chapter 2. Vihaya kama nyaksarvan bhumam chadati nikspraha nirmamo nadahankara sashanti madigachati. One who gives up these material desires, sarvan, bhumam chadati nikspraha, lives free of these desires. Ajata shatra, nirmamo nadahankara. Not claiming anything as his own, realizing everything belongs to Krishna. And nidahankara. Ahankara is this false sense of self, right? This is false ego. I am this body, and things related to this body are mine. That's the basic principle of false ego. So the great soul, the sadhus know, I'm not this body, I'm the soul. And everything belongs to Krishna. So I'm not, this is the real platform of peace. Sashanti madigachati, Krishna said, he gets shanti. So the same point is there in this second verse. Now, how does he get this quality? Because the first description of the sadhu doesn't mention bhakti at all. That's in the next verse. Now don't forget, Kapila Deva is speaking, and he's an incarnation of Krishna. So he says, Mai, unto me. He's speaking to his mother, revealing his divinity. Maya nanyena bhavena bhaktim kurvanta ye dridham matkate tyakta karmanas tyakta swajana bandhava. So, undeviating, unalloyed devotional service to me. This is how one of the qualities of a real sadhu. You know, all of these verses perfectly describe Prabhupada. How tolerant he had to be to come to America. You know, from Vrindavan, he's perfectly situated. Chant Hare Krishna, he's living by the Yamuna River. But he had this order from his spiritual master to preach in English and to spread all over the world. And he had Lord Chaitanya's desire. This knowledge will be spread, my word, my name will be spread all over. So he's impelled, even in age 69, his health wasn't all that great. He gives up everything with like $20 rupees, you know, in his pocket. Gets on a boat, you got a free passage, come to New York City with a bunch of books. Now that's tolerance, and that's, you know, bravery. So, and mercy. So where does he get the strength? By undeviating devotional service to me. And what is the proof for that? Matkrate tyakta karmanas. For my sake, such a person will give up any activity which may be dear to him, if he wants to. A perfect example is Arjuna. You know, he did not want to fight and kill his relatives, but he did it. Matkrate tyakta karma tyakta swajana bandhava. And even if it's necessary, if there are impediments, give up his attraction and association with his friends and relatives and family. Prabhupada did that also, for the sake of the greater human family. So then he goes on, one more about the qualities. Oh yes, and now comes the part about hearing. Marashaya katam rishta shinvandi katayandi cha tapandi vivadastapa naitarmangata chetasa. Madgata Chaitas, I mean, their mind is on me. And because of that, they're always eager to hear the glories of Krishna. Marashaya, Kata. Kata, which has taken shelter of me, which is related to me, which is Mrishta. Very sweet. Madodam, madodam, babadasya vabo, madodam, madodam, badanam, madodam. Literally means sweet. And holy name is the sweetest of all. Once we become pure, we'll appreciate it even more. So, Shinvandi Katayan, and what's the result? They're hardly bothered by the miseries of this world. You're able to tolerate like anything, you know. And we see the perfect example in Prahlad, Haridas Thakur, in the modern age. You know, the Prabhupada tolerated so much. Uh-oh, sorry, I forgot to turn it off. I'll do that. Sorry about that. So they're able to tolerate all the misery because they're always immersed in Krishna consciousness by hearing and chanting and serving like that. So then he describes, after that, then he says to his mother, Tahite sadhavak sadhva, you should search out such association of sadhus. Because their association, so he said, those who are free of all material desire, he repeats a little bit. By their association, you will become free of all the faults that are now impinging on your consciousness due to previous bad association. Now, those who are familiar with the Gita, in the 15th chapter, there's this formula for surrender. Now listen for this. Nirmana moha chita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinavritta kama. So he describes, I won't go through the whole verse, but in that very first line, he says, Nirmana moha, notice the nirmana, the amanina, the same thing as we have the first element of knowledge. Free of the bewilderment of false pride. Nirmana moha, jita sanga dosha. Having conquered over all of the faults that have come from previous bad association. It's the exact same instruction. Sanga dosha. We always have carrying with us so much sanga dosha. This life in this Kali Yuga. You know, we have to overcome that. We overcome it with good sangha. So then comes the most famous key verse in this whole series. And it says, Satam prasangan. Notice the same word, prasangan. It began with prasangan majaram pasham. Satam prasangan mama virya sambido bhavanti ritkana rasayana katha chadjoshanat asu apavarga vartmani shraddha rati bhaktaranu kamishyati. This one's definitely worth memorizing. So by associating with the sats, with the saints, these sadhus, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear my glorification. Mama virya samvido. Conversation, talks about my heroic activities, which are ritkana rasayanak. They're the life-giving elixir for the heart and the ear. In other words, very pleasurable. It's not bitter medicine. It cures the disease of birth and death, but it's very sweet. Bhavanti ritkana rasayana kata. Tadjoshanat ashu. By following this process, what is the process? This is what you're doing here. You know, I'm trying to speak just what I heard from the Bhagavatam and from the Bhagavad Gita. So it's not as potent as obviously 1/1,000,000th of the potency of Prabhupada, but if I repeat nicely, it's there. So you're doing it. This is the yoga process. You didn't have to perform any great austerity, you know. You didn't have to go off to the Himalayas and, you know, take a little prasadam. That's not austerity. So, so what does he say? Ashu, quickly, one develops, ashu, this apavarga vartmani. Now, apavarga is an interesting word. It means liberation. And it's one of these words that the acharyas have analyzed. I don't want to get too far afield here, we're running out of time. Oh my God. The material miseries are divided into this pavargas. There's different groups of letters, and one of them is the labials. And they just pronounce with the lips. Nothing going on here. Pa, pa, ba, ba, and ma. P with an H, B with an H, and M. Each one stands for a different element of suffering. Parishrama, hard work. So hard work just to maintain the hard struggle for existence, Prabhupada says. So much so that penila, that foam comes from the mouth practically. You're working so hard day and night, 12 hours, 5 jobs. You know, God. So, but okay, I'm maintaining, but it's a misery. So pa, and ba, and that's the B is like bondage. You remain bound, you know, within this world. And BH, or Prabhupada says another one is Bhyartata, which means futility. You really can't get ahead. You work so hard and you're really not making progress. You're barely, you know. And then comes Bhaya, BH, Bhaya is fear. You're getting older. Oh my God. There's millions of people now, as we speak, who are afraid of being thrown out on the street because they're going to get evicted. You know, because they had an eviction moratorium. Now it's expired. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Can you imagine the anxiety? You know, you're living in the ashram. You know, I'm living in my apartment. BBT is paying the rent. That's from serving Krishna. Ed, you're not in danger of being thrown out of your house. You see, because he's a devotee. You know, so that's part of it. Krishna sent that facility. So, so what's the climax of this verse? You quickly on this path of liberation, you quickly develop these 3 things, which are essential for bhakti: Shraddha, Rati, and Bhakti, which means pure love. So faith is deepened by hearing these words of the great devotees, by reading Prabhupada's books. And and the next verse, I won't go into all the Sanskrit, but he says, in this way you develop vairagya as well. And this is Rijubhi Marga. It's the most easiest process of self-realization. Come to the Hare Krishna temple, dance and chant, take some prasad, hear a class. That's your process of self-realization. Don't try anything, anyway, that's Lord Chaitanya's movement. And that's what Prabhupada says. He stressed on hearing. If the common man simply hears from authoritative source, he can progress, especially, according to Lord Chaitanya, if he hears the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare. Now that wasn't difficult, you know? And just hearing one name, you've just got rid of millions of births of karma. So that's exactly what. One should give up the endeavor to understand the Absolute by speculative reasoning. That's exactly the verse. Prabhupada's quoting the verse. One should learn to become the servant of those who are in knowledge of the Supreme. The first service, most important, is to hear attentively. Ardent hearing. That's service to the Guru. and then they get shelter here of the devotee, hear from him about self-realization, follow in his footsteps. One will be gradually elevated to the position of a pure devotee. So this is a very key verse. Any quick questions? Okay, go ahead.
Text, it says, because of their tendency to hear from authorities.
They
So-
also transcend.
Because of their tendency. And so in the purport, as for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. I'm thinking that's who they're referring to by there, the good soul who...
Well, there goes back, and there are those who, although not conversant, so the plural is there in the verse. You see what I'm saying? But, yeah, I mean, sure.
Because
The
they call him a common man.
Common man means, yes. In other words, you don't have any great assets of yoga, and you're not born in the Brahmin family, you're not very wealthy, you're not very educated, you don't have any of the material opulences. But if you have this one good quality of being willing to hear from the right sources, then you can advance nicely.
That's what makes him a good soul, is their ability to hear? Because
Yeah.
as for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there's a chance for advancement by
Yes,
hearing. That's kind of what
one
I'm
has
trying
to
figure
be right. One has to be humble enough to put one's own ideas aside. The model is right here in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 7, where Arjuna surrenders. He was playing the role of one who was speculating and figuring out, how can I get out of this horrible situation of having to kill my friends and kill my guru, my teacher and my grandfather. So he had speculating. He was calling on the Vedas. He was quoting different parts of the Vedas. This is horrible. There won't be the women will be unprotected. They'll be polluted, and there won't be offerings. I'm not going to be part of it. I'm going to the forest. So he was acting the role of someone who is not a good soul, not ready to hear from Krishna at first. But then he changed in that. It says, "Karpa nidosho." There's a dosha again. This fault. Karpa nidosho bahata swabhava. I've lost my swabhava, my real nature as a warrior, because of my miserly mentality. He's recognizing it. So now he's saying, "Pritchami tvam dharma samudacheta." My mind is bewildered about dharma, which is a horrible situation in the Vedic culture. You have to know what the dharma is, and you have to be willing to do it, what real dharma is. So he said, "Please, Krishna, I'm surrendering to you now as my guru. Now you tell me for certain what's the best path. Prapanna, I surrender unto you." So everything changed then. And then a few verses later, Krishna begins his instruction. Ashochan, Ashochan, you're speaking learned words as if you're some great pundit, but you don't know the first thing. You're lamenting for what's not worthy of grief, this dead body, the soul in the body thing. And then from there on. So he was willing to hear. So we have to be willing to hear it, like Arjuna did. Time to have a kirtan. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. So now these curtains will open in a minute, and we'll have a little kirtan. You're welcome to join us. All right, we'll pick up tomorrow, 27. Okay.